38-year-old Indiana man Donald P. Murray was arrested by Terre Haute police on multiple occasions from 2019 to 2021 for similar offenses. Murray was first spotted driving without lights in late November of 2019. He evaded law enforcement, but was apprehended on December the 3rd. He was held without bail on criminal recklessness and resisting law enforcement. 6 weeks later, he was released, but not long after that, Murray was again arrested after leading officers on a brief pursuit through several Indiana streets on February the 17th of 2020. This time, he was accused of resisting law enforcement, reckless driving, possession of methamphetamine, maintaining a common nuisance, and auto theft. He was held in lieu of a $15,000 bail. After his second arrest, records indicated that Murray was jailed 5 more times for the same offenses. As of the latest updates, he'd been released on June the 29th of 2022 after serving 6 months behind bars. In light of his 7 arrests, we will refrain from making any snarky comments about the tattoo on his forehead. It does all the talking for itself. Number 11. Albert Lee Gardner. After serving a 9.5-year sentence for lewd and lascivious battery, 29-year-old Florida man Albert Lee Gardner was taken back into custody a day after his release. Gardner was released on July the 7th of 2023 and was required to wear a GPS tracking device. When his probation officer noticed that he'd been at a 7-Eleven in Brooksville for an unusual period of time, deputies were called to the location shortly before 2 a.m. on July the 8th. Gardner, however, was nowhere to be found. Only his ankle monitor was recovered in the store's trash can, according to the Hernando County Sheriff's Office. Subsequently, a call came in about a man who had overdosed less than a mile down the street. Authorities responded to the call and learned that it was Gardner who'd taken an unknown narcotic. Gardner was revived after being administered Narcan. When he was cleared at Becera Health Brooksville, he was booked without bond and charged with violating his probation and tampering with an electronic monitoring device. Gardner was sporting some remarkable facial tattoos in his mugshot. Number 10. Mercy Mary Becera and Johnny Louis Hartley. A California couple who pleaded no contest to the death of a toddler was sentenced under a plea deal. 48-year-old Mercy Mary Becera and 43-year-old Johnny Louis Hartley, both from Whittier, crossed the border and entered Tijuana at the San Isidro land port of entry through a pedestrian lane on August 9th of 2016. When Mexican custom agents attempted to stop them, Becera fled, but Hartley, who was carrying a duffel bag, was detained. Authorities did an X-ray of the bag and discovered a lifeless body inside. Shortly after the discovery, Becera was also taken into custody. She and Hartley were later turned over to the San Diego officers and booked into jail on suspicion of murder. An autopsy determined that the body Hartley was carrying belonged to a girl who'd suffered malnutrition associated with chronic neglect before drowning. Further investigation determined that the victim was the daughter of a woman whom the couple had allegedly trafficked since November of 2012. Prosecutors said that Becera and Hartley had seized the child and severely abused her from January of 2016 to August of the same year. The two were facing several charges, including murder and torture. On May the 18th of 2021, Becera and Hartley pleaded no contest to involuntary manslaughter, child abuse, human trafficking of an adult, and criminal threats. The former was handed a 24-year state prison, while the latter was ordered to serve nearly 37 years behind bars. In addition, they were both ordered to register as offenders. They were ridiculed online for their looks during the duration and in the aftermath of their trial. Number 9. Michael Ruiz. Through facial tattoos, an Arizona man was identified as a suspect in an armed robbery that unfolded at a home improvement store in Phoenix on January the 30th of 2021. Shortly after 8 p.m., 2 male suspects entered the Home Depot store near Cave Creek and Bell Roads and selected numerous items. A witness observed both men exiting the store separately without paying and then coming back in together. The suspect with the face tattoos was then heard telling his accomplice something to the effect that there was no need to worry because he had a gun and would use it. That same suspect later walked back toward the exit of the store with a shopping cart full of items and the gun in his waistband. Approaching the exit, he told an employee that he was armed and would shoot them. A witness reported the incident to the police. Investigators talked to the witnesses and several others and viewed surveillance footage. They were able to identify the armed suspect as Michael Ruiz, The 32-year-old was tracked down near 29th Street and Bell Road on February the 21st. After his Miranda rights were read to him, Ruiz admitted that he'd been inside the Home Depot with another person whom he didn't identify. He said that he'd shoplifted from the store and that he was carrying a BB gun, which he didn't use or threaten anyone with. After his arrest, no further updates had been made to the public. Ruiz might want to consider wearing some form of disguise the next time he decides to rob a store. Number 8. Elisa Zebrasky. Elisa Zebrasky has previously appeared in one of our videos, but we'd like to include her again since she's in the process of yet another remarkable transformation. In June of 2018, the 27-year-old from Cleveland, Ohio, got the elaborate Day of the Dead tattoo on her face, which included a spider web on her forehead, as well as black shading around her eyes, nose, cheeks, and lips. In the same year, she was arrested at least 3 times. On her 3rd arrest, she was taken into custody for theft and drug possession charges. Her mugshot, showing her heavily tattooed face, then went viral. After completing a court-ordered drug rehabilitation program, Zebrasky started undergoing a laser removal process in October of 2019. The treatment, which was a community outreach initiative by the Ink Initiative in Austin, Texas, required 12 sessions to carefully remove all the ink from her face. Despite having tattoos all over her body, Zebrasky apparently wanted to remove only the ones on her face and hands due to their association with her ex and the ridicule she had suffered online. She posted images of her tattoo removal journey on social media with support from her family and new partner, saying that she was in the healthiest relationship she'd ever been in. Number 7. Michael Carter. In Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, 36-year-old Michael Carter was arrested after causing a disturbance at a convenience store on December the 30th of 2015. Carter was initially seen strolling into a Whataburger wearing a cape and a mask with a toy gun tucked into his waistband. He subsequently entered a come-and-go convenience store located on Kenosha Street. When the female store manager asked him to leave, Carter refused and locked himself in the men's restroom, causing the manager to contact local police. According to the arrest affidavit, a responding officer repeatedly tried to get the man to come out. At one point, Carter opened the door and yelled obscenities at the officer. He was eventually taken into custody and booked in the Tulsa County Jail on a $500 bond in January. Carter pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor charge of obstructing a police officer and was sentenced to 18 days of incarceration. He was credited for the time he'd already served and was released. About a month later, on February the 5th, deputies were called to the 7,000 block of North Peoria Avenue to reports of a man pointing guns at motorists. 4 witnesses told authorities that they thought the guns were real and that they were going to be shot. Shortly after 11:30 p.m., they found Carter in possession of 3 plastic weapons, including an M16 style gun, a handgun, and a knife. Carter claimed that he was pointing the guns because he'd been jumped a few days prior. Carter was again booked into the Tulsa County Jail. He was held in lieu of $100,000 bail on 4 counts of assault with a deadly weapon. He does not look difficult to pick out in a crowd, and he might want to consider laying low for a while. Number 6. Michael Vines. In the wake of a car accident that took place in Greenville, South Carolina, the driver was caught in unlawful possession of a firearm. In June of 2018, Greenville police released a statement saying that 24-year-old Michael Vines crashed his Toyota Camry into a power pole. Responding firefighters noticed Vines tossing a weapon into the grass nearby. Police officers later recovered the gun, which was a loaded Smith & Wesson .38 caliber revolver. Vines, who appeared with a handgun tattoo across his forehead in his mugshot, had been federally prohibited from having a gun. He was consequently charged with unlawful carrying of a firearm as well as speeding and driving under a suspended license. It is unclear if having a handgun tattooed on your forehead counts as owning a firearm. Number 5. Baisley Morgan. A Las Vegas judge ordered that a Nevada man's racist tattoos be covered up throughout his robbery trial. In May of 2013, 21-year-old Baisley Morgan allegedly took a man's motorcycle at gunpoint. Days after the robbery, he murdered 75-year-old Jean Main during the course of a burglary on Green Pasture Avenue. On May the 30th, he was arrested and booked into the Clark County Detention Center on charges of murder, robbery, burglary, and kidnapping. Before he could be tried for the robbery charge, an entire group of potential jurors said in June of 2016 that they couldn't be impartial after seeing Morgan's tattoos. His tattoos, which included a swastika inside a clover under his eye and the word "Baby Nazi" across his neck, were thus ordered to be concealed in an effort to get him a fair trial. Despite appearing in front of a new jury with a tattoo-free face, Morgan was convicted of robbery in August of the same year. 3 months later, he was handed a 3 to 9 year sentence. Later, in 2018, he pleaded guilty to the shooting death of Maine and was ordered to serve at least 44 years behind bars. Number 4. Charles Edward White, Jr. On February the 3rd of 2016, Charles Edward White, Jr. from La Follette, Tennessee, critically stabbed another man. Following an altercation, the 44-year-old used a knife to stab Jess Miller, aged 34. Police were called to the scene shortly before 7 p.m. and found Miller with severe knife wounds to his abdomen. He was airlifted to the University of Tennessee Trauma Center in Knoxville for treatment. The next day, White turned himself into authorities and was booked into Campbell County. He was facing charges of aggravated assault. Jail records indicated that White was sentenced to 6 years of incarceration. In his mugshot, the tattoos on Charles White's forehead and neck read "Psycho" and "Nazi." Number 3. Stetson Johnson. Oklahoma teen Stetson Johnson, who was accused of forcing himself upon 2 women, was beaten up and left unconscious with a tattoo that spelled "rapist" across his forehead. On April the 14th of 2011, the 18-year-old from Oklahoma City biked over to Midwest City to meet up with 25-year-old Kimberly Sue Vergara, whom he'd met through a friend and communicated with online. Johnson and Vergara seemingly clicked, and he spent the next few nights at her home. A couple of days later, Vergara left the house to see a tattoo artist by the name of Richard Lynn Dellert, leaving Johnson and her 33-year-old friend Lorena Amanda Hodges behind at her home. Not long after she left, Vergara received a call from Hodges, who claimed that Johnson had tried to assault her. Vergara then claimed that he had assaulted her as well. Why Vergara had allowed Johnson to stay after this alleged assault is unclear. Vergara then returned to Midwest City with Dellert, and along with Johnson and 21-year-old Zachary Provence, the 4 planned to punish Johnson. At around midnight on April the 17th, the group restrained Johnson with duct tape, and Dellert tattooed the words "rapist" and "I like little boys" on his forehead and chest respectively. After inking him, Johnson was thrown to the ground and kicked in the face several times by Dellert and Provence, while the 2 women took turns using a stun gun on his genitals. The group then put Johnson in a car and transported him to Eagle Lake in Del City, where they beat him senseless with a baseball bat. The group then left, and Johnson eventually woke up and walked to a nearby mobile home park, where a resident called the police. Johnson, whose mother claimed had the mental capacity of a 6th grader, was then taken to the hospital. He was placed in the intensive care unit for treatment of a fractured skull, a broken nose, and other wounds. Vergara, Hodges, Dellert, and Provence were later arrested and held without bail. During a hearing in Oklahoma County District Court in June, all 4 pleaded guilty to kidnapping and maiming Johnson. Additionally, Vergara, Hodges, and Provence pleaded guilty to assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. Dellert entered a no-contest plea to the assault and battery charges, but admitted to tattooing Johnson. Dellert and Provence were each sentenced to 10 years in prison, followed by 10 years of probation. Vergara and Hodges were each sentenced to 5 years behind bars, followed by 5 years of probation. Number 2. Justin M. DiCaprio. At around 12:15 p.m. on September the 9th of 2020, a 911 dispatcher received a call about a man running in Auburn, New York, wearing an orange jumpsuit issued to inmates at the Cayuga County Jail. The jail in question was immediately put on lockdown, and after a head count, all inmates were accounted for. Auburn police later located the man, Justin M. DiCaprio, wearing the orange jumpsuit on Grant Avenue. Officers confirmed that the clothing was conspicuously marked and unmistakable as jail-issued clothing. According to a sheriff's office press release, the 29-year-old was arrested and charged with possession of stolen property. He was transported to the Cayuga County Public Safety Building, where he was processed and released on an appearance ticket. DiCaprio couldn't explain why he was in possession of the uniform. but records indicated that he'd previously been an inmate at the jail. We will line up our previous release on 11 bystanders who stopped criminals for you after number 1. If you'd like to, you can stay tuned and enjoy that one as well still. Number 1. Dominic Santana. 61-year-old anti-Trump protester Dominic Santana was arrested after running in front of the former president's motorcade on the afternoon of June the 13th of 2023. As Trump departed federal court, his motorcade was traveling down a street in Miami, Florida, where supporters and protesters were lined up on both sides. Santana, who was wearing a pinstripe prison uniform, rushed to the former president's vehicle and showed a sign that read, "Lock him up." Agents immediately grabbed Santana and pushed him back on the sidewalk, where he was arrested on misdemeanor charges. According to the Daily Mail, Santana claimed that he only ran into the road to escape from Trump supporters who were physically assaulting him. Number 11. Quick Thinking Bill. An armed man on the run was captured by Ohio authorities with the help of a quick-thinking bystander on April the 3rd of 2018. Although the Columbus Police Department released very few details to contextualize the situation, surveillance footage released in the aftermath showed the suspect running down the sidewalk on foot. A man with a cane, identified only as Bill, saw the armed man approaching him outside the library in West Columbus. Bill, who'd been visiting the library with his granddaughter, stuck his leg into the suspect's path, tripping him. When the man hit the ground, his gun slid out into the street, allowing law enforcement to recover the weapon before taking him into custody. Speaking on the incident, one Columbus officer noted, "It looked like training kicked in when Bill boldly sprung into action." Number 10. Tim Radcliffe. In August of 2022, surveillance footage captured a would-be robber accosting an elderly man in the outdoor seating area of a Hollywood restaurant. The suspect walked right up to the victim and sucker-punched him in the face before stealing his wallet and cell phone. The owner of the restaurant, later identified as Tim Radcliffe, watched the horrifying robbery unfold and immediately sprung into action. He chased after the thief and tackled him to the ground, where he remained until the arrival of Los Angeles police about 9 minutes later. The impact of Radcliffe's tackle had shaken the stolen wallet free from the robber's grasp, allowing the restaurateur's girlfriend to return it to the elderly victim. While speaking with a local news outlet in the wake of the incident, Radcliffe said, "In regards to being a good Samaritan, I'd happily do it again." Number 9. London mobile phone theft. Dramatic cell phone video of a mobile phone thief being tackled to the ground by a courageous bystander surfaced online in September of 2022. According to subsequent reports, the incident occurred on the afternoon of the 29th, when an unidentified burglar donning black clothing and a surgical mask snatched a woman's phone away from her before fleeing on foot down St. Thomas Street near Borough Market in London. At one point during the viral recording, an onlooker stepped off the sidewalk and brought the suspect down with what was described as a rugby tackle. A middle-aged woman subsequently placed the robber in a chokehold to prevent him from escaping. By the time Metropolitan Police officers came on the scene, each of the individuals involved had dispersed, and the stolen phone had already been returned to its owner. Number 8. Sean Presley. On December the 5th of 2021, 87-year-old Pat Goins was shopping at a Kroger grocery store in Lemon Township, Ohio, when her purse was suddenly snatched from her cart by a man who subsequently fled the scene on foot. Goins cried out for help, alerting another nearby shopper, Sean Presley, to the situation. The latter chased the robber out to the parking lot and proceeded to make a citizen's arrest before he could reach his car. At the behest of Presley and other bystanders, the suspect, identified as 58-year-old Derek Vaughn, apologized to Goins upon returning her purse. Butler County Sheriff's deputies soon arrived to take him into custody on robbery and theft charges. Following this serendipitous encounter, Goins and Presley became friends, reportedly making plans to meet for a celebratory dinner date. The brave bystander was also given the Sheriff's Citizens Award for his valiant actions. Number 7. Guam armed robbery. shortly after 10 p.m. on March the 20th of 2016, the Guam Police Department received reports of an armed robbery at the Papa Nyok store in Merizo. Officers responded to the scene where they came upon a pair of young men being subdued by a group of civilians. It subsequently emerged that 24-year-old Kiala Muna and Keanu Muna, aged 19, had ambushed the owner of the store shortly after he'd locked up for the night. The two assailants, armed with baseball bats, demanded he hand over the store's cash bag before assaulting him in his car. A group of bystanders witnessed the attack and chased after the robbers, who were eventually caught and held down until the arrival of law enforcement. Following their citizen-assisted arrest, the Munas faced charges of robbery, aggravated assault, possession and use of a deadly weapon in the commission of a felony, and conspiracy. Number 6. Penticton Smash and Grab. At about 2 p.m. on January the 29th of 2016, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Penticton were called to Paris Jewelers in the Cherry Lane shopping centre after receiving a report of a glass display case being shattered by a would-be thief. Officers subsequently learned that the robbery attempt had been carried out by 26-year-old Devon Eric Brazeau, who was swiftly tackled to the ground by an attentive bystander after smashing the display case with a dumbbell. A second suspect managed to escape, but investigators found a stolen Ford pickup truck believed to have been used by the robbers idling near the mall's entrance. Brazeau was restrained by the bystander until the police arrived, at which point he was taken into custody. He pleaded guilty to theft over $5,000 and 2 breaches of probation in connection to the bungled smash and grab, which was reportedly intended to help pay for his dog's vet bill. Brazeau was consequently jailed for 10 months, followed by 18 months of probation. Number 5. Good Samaritan in Greenwich. The police in Greenwich, Connecticut received reports of an attempted robbery on Lower Greenwich Avenue at about 4:30 p.m. on July the 18th of 2022. The resulting police report detailed a woman and her brother had just purchased some electronic items from the Apple store when they were followed out by a pair of suspects who tried to forcibly steal the merchandise. A bystander came on the scene and assisted the victims in fending off the would-be muggers, who subsequently fled in a silver sedan. The woman's face was injured in the attack and her brother reportedly sustained 2 broken fingers, but fortunately their purchases were returned to them, in large part due to the quick-thinking actions of the unidentified Good Samaritan. Number 4. Shepherd's Bush Jewelry Store Raid. An armed gang dressed in all black and wearing motorcycle helmets stormed into Sultan Jewelers in Shepherd's Bush, West London on October the 25th of 2019. It was reported that the robbers had driven a Range Rover through the shop's window before using sledgehammers and brass knuckles to threaten employees. They smashed open display cases and attempted to make off with the merchandise inside, but were thwarted by a group of noble bystanders who'd witnessed the incident and confronted them. The heroic shoppers pinned one of the suspects to the ground until officers arrived and arrested him on charges of robbery, dangerous driving, possession of an offensive weapon, criminal damage, and receiving stolen goods. The man, identified as 34-year-old Ben Wegener, pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 10 years behind bars. As of the latest developments, his 2 accomplices remained at large. Number 3. Aggressive Frontier Airlines passenger. An unruly passenger on board a Frontier Airlines flight from Philadelphia to Miami on July the 31st of 2021 needed to be forcibly restrained by his fellow flyers. 22-year-old Matthew Berry was said to have been acting belligerently throughout the flight, yelling profanities from his window seat while making inappropriate passes at the flight attendants. At one point, Berry spilled his drink all over his shirt, prompting him to go to the bathroom to clean up. According to the resulting arrest report, the man emerged shirtless, then milled about the cabin for about 15 minutes before groping a pair of female flight attendants. A male attendant was subsequently asked to keep an eye on Berry, who proceeded to punch him without warning. Other passengers then stepped in to bring an end to the in-flight chaos. They held Berry back against his seat as they wrapped him in duct tape to prevent him from getting up again. He was recorded on cell phone video shouting, "Help!" as he was being restrained, but he eventually calmed down as the plane prepared to land. In the incident's aftermath, Berry was arrested and charged with 3 counts of assault, to which he pleaded guilty. In May of 2022, he was sentenced to 60 days in jail, followed by 1 year of supervised release. Number 2. Michael Waldorf. On the evening of May the 28th of 2021, a San Francisco police officer responded to a report of a person making threats. Upon her arrival, the policewoman ordered the suspect to turn around and place his hands behind his head. Although the unidentified man initially complied, he grabbed the officer as she approached and wrestled her to the ground, as was later detailed by a bystander named Michael Waldorf. The suspect had the officer in a death grip and was squeezing her head and pulling her hair. Waldorf, along with several other witnesses, rushed over to render aid to the incapacitated officer. The man was struck over the head and pulled off of the policewoman, whose colleagues were quickly dispatched to the scene to place her assailant in handcuffs. She was subsequently taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. Number 1. Greenwood Park Mall shooting. Just before 6 p.m. on July the 17th of 2022, 20-year-old Jonathan Sapperman entered the food court at Greenwood Park Mall in Greenwood, Indiana, and opened fire with a 6-hour M400 semi-automatic rifle. The onslaught lasted for about 15 seconds, resulting in 5 casualties, 3 of whom ultimately succumbed to their injuries. Sapperman was eventually stopped by a legally armed civilian bystander named Elisha Dickon, who'd been shopping with his girlfriend when the shooting broke out. 22-year-old Dickon struck the gunman with 8 rounds from his Glock handgun, killing him. Although the proactive citizen was widely commended in the incident's aftermath, few other details have emerged about him, as he refused to comment on the situation in order to respect the ongoing criminal investigation and take time to honor the 3 innocent lives lost. Thanks for watching. Would you rather have your ex's face tattooed on your forehead or have your whole face inked to look like a skull? Let us know in the comments section below.